Hello, welcome back to Council Watch. I've been away for a few days and I've been keeping up to date as best I could, and I've just caught up with the final thing this morning. You might remember I did take the mickey, I think, in the last one because of their rules on you can only talk once and you can only talk for 3 minutes, and poor old Andy completely broke the bank by going over multiple times. Well, it would appear that there has been some movement. It's a bit difficult to keep track, actually, because the Rules Committee, the Standing Orders Subcommittee, to give it its proper title, appears to be exempt from having to let us see it, because we're not allowed to see that one. And also, it doesn't exist on the website. Yeah, there have been no meetings. Well, clearly they have, because they were talking about it this morning. So there have been meetings of the Standing Orders Committee. And it did get a bit grumpy. We've seemed to have gone back to the old days of Wendy versus Andy. I have to say, Wendy asked some quite sensible questions, things that she wanted answers to. And for some very strange reason, the proper chair of this meeting wasn't there. So Andy was chairing the meeting, which was incredibly useful because he seemed to be extremely well briefed. And as usual, he knew all the answers. So I'm not going to bore you with the whole thing, because it did go on a bit. But we'll have some little clips and you can make your own decisions on what they were talking about.
56. To consider the following recommendations from the Standing Orders and Policies Subcommittee. So, 56.1, that the rules of debate and standing orders be applied to all meetings of the council. So before we move to this item, so section 1 of standing orders governs the rule of debate. Standing orders as drafted was heavily referencing motions, as in pre-submitted written proposals. They account for a relatively tiny part of the town council's decision making. They're still allowed, but the majority of decision making in the town council, we have an item on agenda to consider a certain item, the debate takes place, and then an informed proposal is made and seconded within a meeting based on the debate that has just taken place. So the proposal was that, provided standing orders themselves are updated to reflect the fact that the majority of our decision making takes place, that the majority of proposals are made within meetings, not pre-submitted written motions, that the rules of debate should apply to all meetings, whether they're council, committee or subcommittee, regardless of whether the proposal has been made within the meeting or whether it's been submitted on a pre-submitted motion.
Right. I better try and explain what that was all about, because it was pretty incomprehensible. If you look at Suffolk County Council and East Suffolk Council, they have a different system to Lowestoft. And the idea is that the people in the debating chamber discuss stuff, and then it's sort of, what they're going to discuss is planned in advance, and there's a bit of discussion. And that is subject to these rules about you can only speak for so long, because it stops people monopolising the meeting. Lowestoft don't really do that. I mean, what they tend to do is not have anything planned in advance, just an agenda item, and then they have a chat about it. So that needs to go back and forth a lot more. So people will perhaps kick an idea out, somebody won't like it, then they, well, what else could we do? They think of a different answer. Someone else says, well, that might work, but what about this? And so it goes backwards and forwards. And because they don't have this sort of sort it out in advance system, for want of a better word, this newly implemented, presumably previously ignored rule on 3 minutes and you can only speak once, doesn't really work for Lowestoft Council. Clearly, with some of the stuff that Andy has to talk about, it clearly works against him most of the time, because he's the person that seems to have a handle on a lot of the sort of fine detail. So he does have to talk a lot. If he didn't, I have to say the quality of the discussions would be poorer, because he's the one that sort of doesn't just go, yeah, it's a good idea. He itemises why it's a good idea, why a certain thing won't be a good idea. So I see his point. And of course, in that video I did, it was poor old Andy who overran the 3-minute rule. So that's what he's talking about.
And with the caveat that the rules are applied fairly. So, for example, the 3-minute rule, to speak only for 3 minutes or for one councillor to speak once, should not apply in a targeted, select or arbitrary way to silence one councillor or to prevent discussion on one item. It either applies across the board or it doesn't apply. And that it's applied fairly and consistently, and that council reviews the situation in 6 months in the light of experience to assess how it's going. That was a recommendation that came out of that discussion. Wendy, then Graham.
I didn't support this because I think it's meaningless, because there's so much leeway for the chair to decide the rules, because there's this thing about at the chair's discretion, which means the chair can decide that somebody can speak 12 times if they want to. So actually it's completely and utterly meaningless. My suggestion was that it's absolutely right, something I raised ages ago, we do not submit motions on the whole. In fact, we don't submit motions. We have a discussion and then a motion or will arise. And my point was, it is at that point that the rules of debate kick in, so that the person who is presenting the motion, when the debate has happened, a motion gets decided, they then can speak, and then other members also can speak once with the 3-minute rule.
I think Wendy got that right. You know, the to and fro. Once you get the sort of nitty-gritty sorted out, then you implement the 3-minute rule, and you can top and tail it with a few people just making a final comment, and then you do the proposing and the voting bit.
You know, just not to keep to the rules. There's
Wendy,
nothing that says they have to keep to the
Can you
rules.
speak to the meeting and not the people down one row, please?
Uh,
Well, you're facing the other way, Wendy.
well,
Can you just speak to the whole meeting? Right, you're not addressing 3 people down one corner of the table.
Okay, I'm not in school either.
No, well,
Right, okay. So I'm trying to get my thinking going.
that's fine.
all
We'll
right?
just carry on.
Well, I think this is meaningless.
Right,
But
you've
I
made that
imagine
clear.
most councillors will vote for it, and I will abstain.
Right.
Well, that was a bit unnecessarily waspy, wasn't it? I mean, you know, there's no need to sort of behave like that. That's what used to get us into trouble. You know, one person says something and somebody else doesn't agree with it, so they sort of try to belittle them a bit. I mean, please don't get me wrong. I mean, Wendy and I often disagree on practically everything. But, you know, there are ways of talking to people, and that was a little bit not so good.
That's fine. Just to be clear, it is not no change. That was made clear in the meeting. Okay? It was made clear that everybody needs to change. I will need to change. Okay? Because I routinely speak more than once on an item, more than 3 minutes. We all do. Other councillors, particularly when they're passionate about a certain issue, when we speak through it, this is not targeted. Okay, and it was made clear there are only 3 standing orders out of all those individual standing orders. There are only 3 that allow for chair's discretion. For any other standing order to be varied, standing orders would need to be suspended.
That's a bit like what we do when we want to speak to somebody who's foreign, isn't it? You just say the same thing again, but just louder. It's not really on.
The chair should not exercise their discretion to apply that selectively in a targeted manner or unilaterally to shut down one councillor or to shut down one issue. That would potentially be a code of conduct issue if they did. So there is an onus on the chair to exercise their discretion in accordance with the code of conduct. It's not actually the chair can just make it up on the hoof. Where I would see this applying, quite honestly, is if we've already spoken about it when the SEMA are at full council. Even if you haven't got a heavy volume of legal items on full council, most full council meetings, the sheer volume of business means you're pretty much nailed on to have a 2-hour meeting. So you can't really afford to have a half-hour discussion on one item.
And it carried on like that for quite a while. You know, some of the points perfectly valid, but it was a bit like watching someone being told off. Not particularly comfortable with that.
I will propose that we adopt this or recommend this to full council.
So it's recommend to full council, yeah.
Yeah, and just to add to what Graham said, Sarah and I have been talking about getting all the chairs and the deputy chairs together to talk about how we apply standing orders in meetings. So there will be a meeting between all the chairs and deputy chairs.
Okay, I'll second the proposal. So I just want to say that, Wendy, I know what your worry is, but there will be a heavy focus and onus on chairs not to do the things that you're worried about. And that will be part of the review. And as individuals, if they do the things that you are worried about, they potentially expose themselves to a code of conduct complaint. So they don't have kind of this control just to make the rules up as they go along that you might think they have. And the other thing is also, I don't see the point in applying the rules of debate to a proposal once it's been made, because at that point the debate's over and you're moving to a vote on the motion. Okay, motions can be spoken to, but you know that this proposal, to recap, was to apply whether a proposal is made within the meeting or whether it comes from a pre-submitted motion. It is not to motions only. Wendy.
One thing that I don't think there's been a discussion or an agreement on, certainly between the chairs, is what is the role of the chair. So the chair, you can say the role of the chair is to make sure that standing orders are enforced, but I think the chair has a bigger role, which is facilitating debate. That seems to be lost. I think that needs to be part of standing. What is the role of the chair? And chairs should actually be slightly impartial.
And that's fine. Wendy, just to be clear, I did not say the role of the chair was to apply standing orders.
And he's on a roll today, isn't he? Just to make it clear, you know, he's only chairing this meeting because somebody else isn't there. You would think it's his own meeting. I guess for all intents and purposes today it is. But it's very odd how he's this prepared for a meeting that isn't actually the meeting he should be chairing. I don't know. We just got to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that they're going to get it right. I'm not particularly convinced, to be honest. Wendy's view seems to have been that the chair of the meeting can use the rules to do what they like. And I've heard nothing at all that says that that isn't exactly what's going to happen. They could, but they won't, because if they did, they'd get a code of conduct strike against them. What does that mean? Absolutely nothing.
So, no, but please listen, all right? The chair does have a responsibility to facilitate debate. They absolutely do. They can have their own opinion, but they most also have a responsibility to be fair, impartial and even-handed with all those present. But actually, so do all other members, okay? So that is not something that just applies to the chair. We all should be fair and consistent and even-handed with each other. What I said was that the chair has a role. It's not their only role, but the chair has a role to maintain the orderly conduct of the meeting. And that will entail use of standing orders. But we're all subject to standing orders. It's not, but it's just, the chair is presiding over the meeting. They need to ensure that the business is transacted, that we get through the meeting, the business is transacted, and that standing orders are applied. They are a tool to be used.
The chair, can we go to vote, please? We've had a lot of discussion.
The mayor's chimed in. She's worked it out. She's absolutely fed up. She says there's been plenty of discussion. Let's just go to the vote. Andy just wants to keep going on and on and on. And I really wish he wouldn't, because it's just old ground being repeatedly ploughed up over and over again. So I thought the Mayor made a sensible interjection here. Of course, it didn't stop him.
Yeah, but I was also replying to a point that had been made, okay, because it was inaccurate and misleading. Okay, but yes, we can move to a vote on this item. Right. Are we all happy what we're voting on? Okay, all in favour, please. That's unanimous. Sorry, Wendy, are you abstaining or against? Right, that's fine. Right, 56.2. To amend section 6D to allow for 2 members to convene an extraordinary meeting of a committee or subcommittee, if not convened by the chair.
I think we'll leave it there. It rattled on in similar vein. It was quite painful in places. If you want to see the full thing, just pop across to the YouTube Council site and watch the meeting in full. It's basically Andy talking loudly at people who don't agree with him. So, you know, it would have been perhaps nicer if someone else had chaired that meeting, to be perfectly honest. It would have been far more amicable and I guess probably not quite so het up in places. Andy wants his way. He wants to talk as long as possible about it. I did think about getting the countdown clock out, but it would be totally pointless because it's his meeting and he can do what he likes. I think that's what he's saying. Anyway, let's leave it there. See you on the next meeting. Look after yourselves. Take care.